Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to another Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building the world of Chestnut Ridge, which is the world that we got from the expansion pack The Sims 4 Horse Ranch, and I'm going to be building a old cemetery and a wedding chapel. I'm not even going to lie to you, I had to really hold back from saying Chestnut Springs when I was introducing what world that I'm building in, which if you're unfamiliar with the world of Chestnut Springs, I will tell you a little bit about that later on, because it kind of does play a part of why I am building this particular lot. But for this build, I really wanted to come into the game and build something which has been on my to-do list for ages, and it was to sit down and build a cemetery. Now, we got a cemetery lot type introduced with the Life and Death expansion pack, which that expansion pack has been out, I think it's around about a year by now, but surprisingly, I just haven't sat down yet and built a cemetery for my save file. But no, for this build, I kind of wanted to merge both a cemetery, but then also some other kind of gameplay into it. And so I just thought it'd be really fun to, combine the idea of having a cemetery and then also a wedding chapel into one. And yeah, that's exactly what I did, and so I really hope you like it. But anyway, getting on and talking a little bit more about the build itself and also what I'm doing right now. So as you can see, I've already come in and done the main structure and then roofing for the build. I just quickly added in almost like a little bell tower into the top portion. Now, the approach in terms of structure that I wanted to go for, I really wanted this to feel like a little western old church, kind of like nestled into the countryside of Chestnut Ridge. And I also feel like I need to explain the building process, because pretty much for this one, you're actually going to see me build two different things, but just in the one speed build, which sounds weird, and I really do need to explain this, but pretty much the whole outside is going to stay the exact same. There's going to be multiple different like graves or tombstones. There's going to be a few bits of like landscaping, there's a few benches, all of that remains the same. But when it came round to the inside, I wanted to have the approach of, if you wanted to in gameplay, depending on what you wanted to play with on one particular evening, you can kind of switch out this build and play with it to be either designed to be for a funeral or designed for it to be for your Sim's wedding, which, saying out loud, two very different things, but I just thought for gameplay it would just be really handy. On the gallery there is going to be two versions of this build, so it kind of depends on what you want to play with, whether you want to play, a funeral if you fancy, or if you wanted your Sims to maybe get married here. There is basically going to be two versions on my gallery. Like I said, the exterior, it stays the exact same, but it's just the interior, it's just depending on what kind of gameplay you want to go for. But the reason why I really wanted to have a wedding chapel is there's two main reasons. One of the reasons being, in the save file that I'm currently building, I really want to go in and take some pictures of certain like married couples from when they got married back in the day, and like kind of stage it in front of a wedding chapel, just because for me, I just feel like that adds so much storytelling and just so much lore to my save. But then secondly, I am currently in the process of reading a very popular book series called the Chestnut Springs series, which, if you've not read it, it is a romance book series, and it's set in this small town which is called Chestnut Springs, and it's very much focused on this one particular family. And there's 5 books, and each book is kind of like a character development of each member, if you want to put it that way, but it's very much focused on like cowboy romance and stuff, and I just love it. Like, honestly, I've been eating it up. I am on the 5th book. It's such a good series, but where I'm so like cowboy in my head now, because I've just been so obsessed with this book series, I just thought, well, for my save file, if you're someone that maybe wants to get your Sim to move to the world of Chestnut Ridge and maybe, date a cowboy or a cowgirl or something, I wanted you to have the opportunity to be able to get married in like the local small town wedding chapel. And yeah, I just thought it would be such a fun idea. Can I just also say that so far in my save, I have created so many different potential single Sims for your Sim in the world of Chestnut Ridge, just because I'm just so infatuated by this book series, and I'm kind of living out the Chestnut Springs series through the Sims in one of my own personal gameplays, and I just thought, yeah, it would be really nice to have a wedding chapel in the world. But then, kind of on a similar token, with a cemetery, I wanted it to be in my save file for a few different reasons. One reason being, for some reason, maybe your sim needs to host a funeral. You know, maybe someone has passed away and you wanted to, you know, for a massive big funeral at the local like cemetery, church, graveyard situation, and you wanted a place to be able to do that. But then also for my save in the world of Chestnut Ridge, I've got off memory around about 11 gravestones currently sitting in just this one world alone, because I honestly have done so much lore for the world of Chestnut Ridge alone. Like I'm trying to add so much lore into every single world that I'm creating for my save file, but where I'm just so in love with this like cowboy romance series that I'm currently reading, I've just been really focused on kind of like the lore and the backstories in this one particular world. And with doing that, I've created so many different family members and so many different relatives that, you know, have since passed away, and I need somewhere for their gravestones to be. But I was just thinking that it could be really nice that if you wanted to, in my save, you could visit the graveyard and kind of like see the pictures of the previous generations of Sims and kind of like how they're dotted about. Also, something which is kind of off subject but also kind of not, because one of the Sims that I'm going to be speaking about here is actually going to be residing in this graveyard, bless her. But basically, in my save file so far, a few weeks ago, I came in and I basically made a mini game in my save file in just this world, which it sounds so silly saying it, but I really want the save file that I'm building to be filled with so much storytelling and so much lore, but then I also want there to be kind of like a little bit of like a mystery. And so a few weeks back, I don't know if you would have seen it, but I built this like struggling dad's house in this world. And if you have seen that video, you might know where I'm going with this, but if you haven't, pretty much, long story cut short, there is this dad, and he had a wife once upon a time, and they had a series of multiple different children, but the majority of them were twins. And so, you know, most of them had like either a brother or a sister or whatever, and they were, you know, they were twins, so they also had a twin. But there was this one child in this family that when they were born, they didn't have a twin, and they always kind of felt like a bit of a lone wolf and, you know, that kind of situation. Basically, the storyline is, in my save file, the mum actually had a secret affair. I've already come in and I've made the affair happen kind of situation, but the mum had this secret affair, and the reason why she didn't have twins is because the genetics weren't there, because the genetics to have like twins or triplets came from her husband's side, because, and I might be wrong about this, but I think there's something to do with like genes and stuff with carrying over twins and triplets. If I'm wrong, I'm so sorry, but I believe that's the case in some situation. But I just thought this would be so fun for storytelling, and so I made this girl, and she has got a dad, but the dad is also in my save file. And basically I've made a mini game where her and her dad share the same birthmark, but you have to kind of go around their house, which I built in this world, and I have already come in and got the mum to write all these different books, and I've made it in a way that it's like the mum is writing the books to her daughter and kind of leading clues to who her real dad is, because in my head, the girl doesn't know who her dad is. But then I also thought, for you, how fun would this be? So I've actually come in and I've got the mum to, write all these different books, but I've been so strategic, and I want to tell you the clue names, but I'm not going to because it will completely spoil it. But I've basically written all these different books, and the name of each book is a different clue. There is 5 in total, and I've scattered them about in their house in this world. I know I'm kind of like giving you something, but then I'm actually not really giving you anything because you can't play it yet. But I'm just so happy and just so excited for this just one little idea, just this one family in this world. And yeah, but the mum is going to reside in this graveyard somewhere. And so if maybe you do eventually download my save file when it comes out, and you wanted to, you know, play out this kind of like mystery of like, oh, hang on, who's her real biological dad, you can kind of find all the different books that have all these different clues, which the clue situation honestly took me a good few hours to figure it out, because I was trying to be really like mysterious but then also clever, so I didn't give it away straight away. Because I mean, you could try and get it like within reading the first like 2 or 3 book titles, you could figure it out straight away, but then I also wanted it to be, you know, a little bit of like a prolonged like active thing for you to do in your gameplay. But yeah, there is all these different books, and they've got all these different clue names, and eventually once you figured it out, you can kind of solidify the fact that, oh, hang on, this actually is this Sim's dad, because yeah, I've already come in and I made a birthmark using you know, we've got like that draw on tattoo feature now where you can basically draw your own tattoos. I am dreadful at that, can I just say. Like, none of the Sims in my save file so far have any custom tattoos, because me and a mouse, when it comes around to drawing, we don't get along. But I did use it to create the exact same birthmark on both the girl and her biological dad, and so it can kind of solidify the fact that yeah, they are related by cross-checking their birthmarks. Sorry, that was a complete tangent, but I've just been so excited to tell you about that because I did it a few weeks ago, and yeah, I mean, I did it based off the Sims that are living in this world, and like I said, the mum is actually going to be residing in this graveyard, because for a little bit of context, hang on, I just realised you might have not seen that video, but if you haven't seen that video, the mum did sadly pass away a few years ago, and yeah, she's in this graveyard with also one of her sons. Honestly, bless their hearts. Now I'm saying it all out loud. Their family really has been through it, but I don't know, it just adds so much storytelling, I just feel like, to my save file, and it's just there's so much lore, and I just love adding lore into my builds and stuff. But either way, besides the point, and getting back and talking about what I'm actually doing right now, as you can see, I'm already quite a good part into kind of like the landscaping, but then also placing down all the different like grave sites or like tombstones. Now I must admit, I was a little bit stuck on how to lay out the graveyard portion, because the thing is, I wanted it to be good for gameplay. Like, I wanted it to feel like your Sims could actually come here, they could sit in front of a tombstone and they could grieve, whether it be a family member, maybe be a friend, you know, relative, whatever it is. I wanted your Sims to actively use it, but then I also wanted it to feel a little bit realistic. What I mean by that is, where I'm from, there is actually quite a few churches. I feel like in England anyway, there is quite a few churches dotted about, but I live quite close to a very old church, and if ever you walk through the church like graveyard section, it's really sad, but you actually see that there is some tombstones kind of like nestled into like shrubs or trees, or just things have overgrown graves over time, which it's really sad. But some of the graves in churches around me anyway, they're so old and they've been there for so long that the landscape around it kind of like takes over and kind of like, I don't want to say claims the area back, but do you know what I mean, like they kind of like grow around it. And so coming into this build, I wanted it to feel realistic in that term, and so you will see I do place, I think like 2, maybe 3 different gravestones into shrubs to make it look like that's been there for a while, you know, like something's overgrown that. But then I also wanted there to be some that, you know, like I said, that your Sims could come here and they could actively use to mourn their relatives. I did really want to include a crypt in this build, because with the Life and Death expansion pack, we got this one object which it's like this crypt. It basically looks like a small little house. Bit of a creepy one, but it's got this small little creepy house, and if you place it down, I think you can fit up to, I think it's 20 like graves in there at once. And that's great, because you know, when you're building a save file and you've got a lot of Sims that have plopped their clogs and you need somewhere for them to be settled, that's really ideal. However, the look of the crypt that we got from the Life and Death expansion pack, it just didn't go with the kind of like how I decorated this graveyard to be, and so I didn't end up using it. However, if you do want to include a crypt into this build, there is the room for it, but it wasn't fitting with the environment around it, because the one from Life and Death looks very like gothic-y, and I'm trying to build like a western church, and it just the style of it just didn't go with this build, if that makes any sense. But either way, over here as you can see, I'm placing down multiple different gravestones. The majority of the ones that I use are from the Life and Death expansion pack, but then some of the ones that I kind of like scattered about in overgrown areas, they are from, I think, the Vampires game pack off memory. But I tried to place down some flowers next to some of them, and I tried to place down some different like photos, which eventually you will be able to see in my save file, which will actually have the different, you know, Sims whose graves they are attached to them. And like I said, it's kind of like a nice, I don't want to say objective, or like a nice little like day out to the cemetery. But your Sims could come here if they wanted to, and you could learn a little bit more about the previous Sims that would have lived in the world of Chestnut Ridge. But either way, as you can see, I'm pretty much coming in now and just finishing up the exterior. Like I said, the exterior pretty much stays the exact same. Like, I don't actually change anything in terms of when I change it to be from a wedding chapel to when I change it to be a cemetery, just because I just thought it would be nicer, because the way that I was looking at it in my head, say for example you live in an area that might have like a local village hall. Say for example, I grew up in a small village, and the village hall was consistently changing. You know, people used to host birthday parties in there, some people used to host, you know, like wedding receptions or engagement parties in there. It kind of like changes over time. This build was kind of like that. Like, I wanted to give the approach that on the inside it changes depending on what your Sims want to do. If you wanted to, you could host your Sims birthday party here. Might be a bit questionable, but completely up to you what you want to do in your gameplay. But either way, you can see that I've now moved in, and I've started coming in and decorating it to first of all be the wedding chapel. Now, the approach that I had to decorating the inside of this build is I basically did the wedding chapel first of all, and you'll see I placed down like the benches, I placed down like certain objects, but then it's only really the decorations that change depending on what kind of service you want to have, depending on if you want to have a funeral or if you do want to have a wedding. Now, in terms of the wedding activities, I didn't want this to be like a proper, you know, like all-out wedding venue. And what I mean by that is I have previously built a wedding venue in the world of Tartosa. That one was kind of like a historic, kind of like castle kind of wedding venue, but for that one I wanted everything around weddings to be kind of in there. I wanted there to be able to have your first meal there, your first dance. I wanted there to be kind of like a reception room. For this one, more so the idea that I had was like small town little wedding chapel, almost kind of like a very quick marriage if you wanted to have that in your game. It's a bit more of like an intimate service in my mind. So, you know, your Sims maybe come here with, say for example, their partner who they're getting married to, and maybe their partner's parents, and maybe your Sims' parents, and maybe that's it. Maybe they want to bring like their best mate or something, but I don't imagine that really big extravagant weddings are hosted here. Going back to the series of books that I'm reading, the Chestnut Spring series, I just love the idea of having kind of like a small town romance possibility in my save file, and maybe your Sim just gets absolutely infatuated by a certain Sim and they just want to really quickly get married to them and they want to have a really small intimate service. That was the kind of approach that I had in terms of the decorations. And I mean, of course, if you wanted to download this build of the gallery and maybe you didn't have as many Sims attending the wedding as seating areas that I've kind of like set aside for it, you could definitely delete some of the benches and replace them with maybe some dining tables and maybe a dance floor and stuff like that. But yeah, for the idea that I had, I was just thinking small town intimate service kind of idea. But you can see in here, I've already come in and placed down the wedding arch. I actually debated on the wedding arch for quite a while, I don't know if you want to notice, but I was at one point going to go for the base game wedding arch that we've got. Off memory, I'm pretty sure the base game wedding arch only had 3 swatches, but at some point in time the team basically came in and updated that wedding arch, then it had more updated swatches, and I was debating using one of the more updated versions of it, but you know, in the end I just went for one that we got from the My Wedding Stories game pack. But also in like the wedding chapel area, I placed down purposely a long kind of like aisle for your Sims to walk down. You might have noticed this at the very start when I was kind of like coming in and mapping out the build, because I wanted there to be enough space for, you know, everything that I wanted to place down in here. So I placed down a wedding aisle that your Sims can, you know, send up or down at Sims 2. Also placed down a little piano in the corner, so if your Sims maybe wanted to have a pianist playing some music when they're walking down, definitely do that, could definitely hire someone. And currently either side of the wedding arch, I have 4 different like sections or 4 different like tiers of different benches for your Sims to sit at. But you'll see in just a second, I actually realised that realistically, how many people actually know that many Sims to invite to this wedding venue and to fill it out? And so at the minute I've got, wait, hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. At the minute I've got 8 wedding benches, but in a second you'll see I end up deleting the very back 2 benches and replace it with just kind of like a nice little side table. Also, something that I wanted to mention, if you notice that quite a lot of the interior process for this build, I keep on like angling the camera down. I was more so doing this because I wanted to make sure the screenshot potential was there. if you know what I mean. Like, I wanted to make sure if you did get your Sims to, you know, get married at this little wedding chapel and you wanted to take a few screenshots of it, or maybe your Sims hire a photographer or something, I wanted to make sure that the angles that your photos would be really pretty. And so you would have seen I keep on like angling down the camera just so I can see what your Sims would see. And I think at one point I also pull out a fridge, which if you did see me pull out a fridge, it was more so for a size reference of like where your Sims would be standing, because, and I've said this quite a few times to be honest with you, but a fridge is a really good point of reference if you want to kind of like see how high something is or see where your Sims would be standing, because with a fridge your Sims ain't ever going to be taller than it. And so if you place it down, you can kind of get a better idea in your mind of where your Sims are going to be. Hopefully you're following along with me. But either way, besides the point, as you can see, I finished up the wedding chapel section, and now I'm moving on into the funeral section. So like I said, the approach that I had to it was more so the difference in the decorations. In my head, I'm thinking if you're going somewhere that at one point is a wedding venue, but then also at a different point might be somewhere to host a funeral service, the ins and outs in terms of like structural things aren't going to change. So I didn't really try and change anything like that. It was more so the decorations and then also a few different furniture pieces. I will admit, I did place down carpet into the funeral venue, if you want to put it that way, but I basically wanted to have a rug running from where you would enter into this church going up to where the coffin would lie, but I couldn't find a rug that was appropriate. And so in my head I placed down carpet, but just thinking it was like a really long runner, if you know what I mean. But yeah, in here there is a little table for your Sims to put a coffin on. There is kind of like a little podium for Sims to make speeches about the past Sim, and then also there's this kind of special table which I placed down kind of towards the back end of the room, but it's kind of got like a display picture, and in gameplay your Sims can put a picture of the Sim that has sadly passed away, and it's kind of like sitting up there in front of everyone at the funeral service. But other than that, I'm going to go around this build, finish it off, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or just search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedrunning video. Bye guys.